Hey yo, what's good? It's me, Saul, and today we're doing another tier list video. Today I'm going to talk to you about what I personally think are the best staple traps in the game and kind of just like ranking them against each other, which is so arbitrary and so subjective that if you in fact, quite frankly, I don't know why you're watching. No, please wait, come back. Like this isn't an objective value that I can quantify. It's just something that I'm doing for fun based on my own personal experience. So this is just pure entertainment value. That being said, I think what I'm going to start doing is I might start leaving the links for these tier lists in the description. That way, because I make these tier lists. I get the card art, the images, and then I crop them down and everything. I fit them into tier maker, and I use my own templates. So if you would like to give it a shot at making your own tier list, if you think I'm completely just stupid, then feel free. But in the meantime, let us begin. So the first trap card that I've put on the list is Bad Aim, and I'm gonna be honest with you, it goes in D. We're starting out at the if you start out at rock bottom, the only way you can go is higher. I hate this card. It's just so stupid. If a card does something, you activate a card, and then I flip up a card and I target a different card and destroy. Wait, is this targeted? I don't remember. Is this targeted or not? Maybe that's why it was viable or valid in some way, shape, or form. I've just always found it to be so dumb. Like, clearly, the card that activated the effect is most likely the problem. Well, not always. Like, let's say your opponent doesn't realize you have bad aim, and then they activate a different card, and then you can target their main card, and that's cool. But like, I would rather just target their main card, and other cards on this list can do that. The better, actually. So it's interesting. It's fine. I hate it. It goes in D. Up next is Ballista Squad, and this is one that I find kind of interesting. I feel like B for Ballista. Now, here's the thing about Ballista Squad. Like, it's got an interesting effect because it is not a standard trap where it's like, oh, discard a card, destroy a card, or you destroy one of your cards, destroy one of your opponent's cards. It specifically says that you tribute a card, which goes very well with, like, any archetype can use it. Like Shiranui uses it to get their cards in the graveyard. That's really cool. And then destroy one of their opponent's cards, serving two purposes with one card, which is really, really good. But because of that specific text, tribute, it just creates for some very interesting situations with decks that want to be tributed. Think Rikas, think Heretics, just decks that specifically say tribute, just arbitrarily. This card could have said anything else and done the exact same thing, but it specifically chose to say tribute. It could have just said send to the graveyard, but it said tribute, and that creates for some great interaction. Now, I don't like that I have to lose a monster to destroy one of yours, but like, because of its uniqueness, I would put it higher, but because it's limited to certain strategies is why I've put it in B. I put it in the middle ground, you get me, like that kind of beat, right? So let's move on. So up next we have Champion's Vigilance. And this is an interesting card for me, right? Because this is an Omni Negate, so off of that, it sounds really good in your ears, doesn't it? But it's an Omni Negate from an older time. It's limited to 1, which is how you know that this card was a problem, right? Where if you have a level 7 or higher normal monster, negate anything. If they summon like anything, right? The problem is the requirement for activation is something that doesn't happen often anymore. I mean, Blue Eyes can still do this, but Dark Magician is currently dead. I mean, Buster Bladers are kind of coming back with the rise of Gaia, but not the normal Buster Blader. You don't usually have that on the field, right? So as a result of that, despite having an outstanding effect, I love the card art. It's beautiful. It's a man on fire, though. Oh, this is tough. This is actually a tough one because it's got a great effect, but because of how bad the requirement is, you're not going to use it often, and also it's limited to 1. So like, even if you do use it, how often are you gonna draw it? Oh, this hurts me. This hurts me. No, I don't like this. This isn't what I wanted to be when I set out on this adventure. I'm gonna put you in B for the sake of my soul. Like this, like that. Okay, cool. So, up next is Countergate, and it is one of the most slept on cards that I have ever seen. It's so underrated. I freaking love this card, and it's free. Just level up Seto Kaiba and you get this card. So on accessibility, ping, you got it. That's you, Chief. Now, what I find to be interesting about this card and why I like it so much is because think Remember that card that where they attack you directly and you negate the attack, or not negate the attack, you negate the battle damage and you draw one card, right? I forget what it's called, but it's a good card, right? So basically you're negating some battle damage and then you get to draw one card with this card as well, right? So you negate the attack, you draw one card, but on top of drawing one card, if it's a monster that you can normal summon, you immediately summon it onto the field. So not only did you just gain card advantage, but then you immediately got board presence as well, and the attack remains negated. So even if you summon a monster that doesn't have enough attack to stand up against the other person's monster, you just got a monster on the field for the price of free while negating their attack. And if you didn't draw a monster, you just got to +1 and negate the attack. I think it's one of the best battle traps in the game. Fight me. Okay, who are you? Drowning? Drowning Mirror Force is a cut above, right? Because what's better than negating my opponent's attack, drawing a card, and gaining some board presence? Nuking their field without targeting anything. See, here's the thing. Because this is a list of traps, I'm ranking it against other traps, right? Because traps in general, by virtue of being traps that your opponent has to, like, it's a trap. Your opponent has to fall into it, which means that they can play around it. But then ranking it against other traps that also have to be played around, like, it is, you can, a field of Blue Eyes is Blue Eyes White Dragon. In fact, no, put a Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon on the field, a Neo Blue Eyes Ultimate, and put a Twin Burst Dragon on the field. One of them attacks, all of them are gone. Yeeted, back into the deck. It's disgusting. Not back into the hand, back into the deck. I mean, they would all go into the extra deck, but you get my point. It's disgusting. It's beautiful. I love you. Up next is Fiendish Chain. Now, Fiendish Chain had its time in the sun. It was a new hotness at the start of the XYZ era. It's interesting. I don't like Fiendish Chain very much. I'm gonna keep it a $150 with you. I feel like Fiendish Chain is one of the easiest negates to get away from. And like, so here are my problems with Fiendish Chain. You target a monster, so one, it's targeted, and then you negate their effects continuously. It's not that their effects are just negated, which means that if they're able to negate that continuous effect, they get away from the effect. So here's an example. Let's say you use Fiendish Chain to negate the effect of a Harpy Lady, and they chain, what's that card? Swallow's Nest, and they jump back into the deck and come out with a different card. Then that Fiendish Chain, absolutely useless. You might as well just use an Ultimate Providence. Now, I get that this has a benefit of not having a discard cost, but like, it's just so easy to avoid. If they Cosmic Cyclone the card on the field, the effect negation stops. And I get it, you would have negated the initial activation of the effect, which is good, but another big problem that I have with it is it clogs up your board space, my guy. Like, if the monster that you Fiendish Chain doesn't get destroyed, if it gets tributed or XYZ summoned or synchro summoned, which happens all the freaking time, then that's just one of 3 spell trap zones that you no longer get to use for the rest of the duel. It's absolutely, I don't like this card. I don't like this card in the slightest. I don't think it was worth it I don't think it's worth it in almost any deck, unless like you have no card advantage in your deck, no draw power whatsoever, and you need a negate. I mean, even then, I would rather have Memory Loss. I'll keep it like, I don't like this card. Memory Loss should be on this list. Alright, moving on. Up next, we have Floodgate Trap Hole. And if I'm thinking in terms of the power of a card, even when it comes to Buddy over here, when it comes to Drowning, I never use Drowning. I'm not a trap kind of guy. I don't tend to use traps very often. So I'm thinking more on the overall power level of the card, but I also have to factor in my own how I feel. Let's talk to Saul. I don't like Floodgate Trap Hole is so good that I don't like it, right? Because I'm thinking of all the times that I've gone against it, and the same applies to Drowning Mirror Force, but I feel like I've gone against it less, and so I have less of a problem with it. Also, I have 3 copies, whereas for Floodgate I only have 1. Even if I had 3, I still wouldn't use it because like I just don't like the idea of floodgates in Yu-Gi-Oh! And I get that they're a core part of Yu-Gi-Oh! But everyone has their playstyle that they enjoy, and I just don't enjoy floodgating my opponent because it's like, okay, rather than playing through you, seeing through your strategy and winning anyway, like the anime type V kind of stuff, I just stop you from playing. So it's not that I prove them. Like, do you remember the movie Pyramid of Light, right? The Pyramid of Light movie where Seto Kaiba faced Yami Yugi, right? And he could have beat him like twice throughout the course of the duel, but he specifically wanted to use the Egyptian gods to beat him. He wanted that that perfect kind of victory, I want that. This feels cheap to me. Like, you didn't get to play. I didn't outsmart you. I just flipped your monsters face down. So for its power level, I can't place it lower than A. But in terms of what it means to me as a duelist, I'm gonna leave that in A. I'm gonna leave that there, Chief. You don't get to be S. Hollowed Life Barrier, free to play. This card is another underrated free to play card in my opinion. Another highly underrated free to play card. Like, let me talk to you. Free to play doesn't have it that bad. Yeah, I'm about to start a war. No, but like, for real, this card is an amazing, like, what this card says, and this card is ridiculous because what this card says is discard one card, all battle damage you would take from your opponent from the rest of this turn, everything is now reduced to 0. And what is insane about that is, you would think that just means, okay, no battle damage. I'll just destroy your monsters, clear your board, and then take you out next turn. You can't destroy their monsters by battle either. That translation of, oh, everything is reduced to 0 means that attack that you just did over your opponent's monster, not only did they not take damage, it's like it never happened. You tickled them with a light breeze, right? In the middle of July. It doesn't do anything. And that to me is absolutely insane. So I could build a full field of monsters, pass my turn, and then activate this card, know that I can't die, and then finish setting up on the next turn, maybe go into an XYZ summon, anything, right? And the only downside is the discard cost, but some decks can take very good advantage of that. I'm actually slightly surprised this card has never been limited because I think it's never been limited because it's so underrated, and it shouldn't be. It's an amazing card. I mean, I don't use it. I don't use it, but that's for a couple of reasons. I play a lot of decks. Like I've said multiple times, I like having cards in my hand. I like having resources in my hand. So I don't like discard costs. Like, I have 3 karma cuts. I barely use them unless I'm playing a deck that I know will draw tons of cards or maintain tons of card advantage. Any day of the week, I'm more likely to use Canadia than I am to use Raigeki Break, just because I know I'm going to get to keep my resources. So I don't like discard costs. And also, I use the Bujins quite often, and we have our own basically archetype specific version of this, so like, we don't really need it. So yeah, that might have been a spicy bit of foreshadowing, because up next we have the one and only Karma Cut. And I know I just said I don't use this card often, but I was a Noble Knight player once, okay? I ran this, Noble Knights with balance. What a time to be alive. 3 karma cuts in the back of your deck. Oh man, I got some fond memories of this card, broski. Like, honestly, now that Noble Knights have been nerfed and they can't really use this card as well anymore, I mean, I think that they always had the power within themselves to be a great archetype. It was just so satisfying to use this card, like send a Merlin to the graveyard, send the Trap to the graveyard. So you were using the card but plussing off of the things that you were sending to the graveyard. It was insane, but you also had to think, because like, let's say you sent a Madrat or a Boars or a Drishtan to the graveyard for Karma Cut. Well, then that means the archetype-specific trap can no longer get them out of the deck for you, and so you have to, my days. I feel like this card is an S specifically because of my nostalgia for Noble Knights. What a time to be alive. Anyway, moving on. Mirror Wall. Now, this is interesting because this was in the anime. This is Bad Wall of D, right? This is just a Bad Wall of D. But when Mai used it in the anime against Yami Yugi, that was some fire. Like, it seemed like this insurmountable force. I remember watching that episode in my boxers in the living room one day. But in Duel Links, it's doo-doo. No. On to the next card. Needle Sealing requires a bigger brain than the one at my disposal, right? It requires a bigger brain than I have, because that's strategizing to put yourself in a position to nuke, because you're nuking 4 cards on the field, which means you either have to lead your opponent into setting up a field big enough to allow a nuke, and then also have it so that you have, because your opponent only has 3 monster zones, so that means one of your monster zones is also going to be hit. So also making sure that the monster zone that gets hit isn't a minus for you, but even then, like, you just nuked 3 of your opponent's cards. But what if they don't summon all 3 cards? Setting up your board in a way that gets them to, you supplement some of the resources to meet the qualification for this card, and also do that in a way that doesn't cause you to take a hit. Like I know Triumphs can use this card very well, and apparently Ritual Beast. I've never piloted a deck that had this card in it, even though I have the card, because like I know that it's good, right? I'm not saying that it's not good. I'm saying that I don't know. It feels like such a high because like it seems so situational, but I've always seen people pull it off so well, where it's like, okay, but what if you're not in a situation where you can nuke the field in a way that doesn't put you at a disadvantage, right? But it seems to work for some people, so I'm gonna put it up there. I included Needlebug Nest just because when Grass Looks Greener got hit, this is where everyone went, but then it almost immediately got a limit 1. So I'm not because it's got I take into account, because this is my personal opinion. It's not just a card on its own, it's all the factors surrounding it in the game. Are there cards better than it? What's its current status? And right now, because of that limit 1, it's a good effect. Mill 5 cards from the top of your deck to the graveyard. That's kind of spicy. But then the fact that you can only have 1 in the deck means that like it's not as crazy as it would be if it wasn't limited. So yeah, C. So yeah, up next is Canadia. Canadia is, I love this card, right? Because this card is great disruption. It's amazing disruption with no discard cost, and then after the fact, after you flip down your opponent's monster, you can then summon this card and be defensive with it. I think that I don't know why this card gets talked about so badly, because like it's actually really, really, really good, and it's in an old enough box now that it gets included in the 50 price gem sales and everything. So like during those, it's not that hard to get. Obviously, like over the regular course of the game, it's a main box UR, so you wouldn't want to go back for it. But like if you got it, you got it, my G. Like I don't understand why people dislike it as much as they do. So I would absolutely put Canadia in S tier. Like I actually, you don't have to discard anything, but you get because like let's say, why do you karma cut a monster? You karma cut a monster because either you don't want it to activate its effect, or you don't want it to become a problem for you later on, or you don't want it to attack, or any one of those reasons. But it being banished doesn't really do anything for you. It's not about yeeting it off the field, it's about preventing it from doing what it does to be a problem for you. And Canadia does that with no discard cost, and then also with extra protection as follow-up later on if you so need it. That's amazing. That's beautiful to me. S tier card. Raigeki Break is bargain bin karma cut. I don't wanna talk. I've never put Raigeki Break in it. Have I ever put Raigeki Break in a deck before? I've never. Like there are obviously some decks who are gonna like it, like maybe Fire Kings type beating, you know, and people here and there. And also it can destroy spells. Oh, it can destroy spells and traps, not just monsters. But aesthetically, it looks nice in B, doesn't it? I like the aesthetic. No, you stay in B just for the aesthetic. Rainbow Life. This card is disgusting. This card is actually disgusting. I don't like this card. Okay, so here's the thing. This card to me is a worse Hollowed Life Barrier, because what this card says is every time you would activate activate this card, and every time you would take damage, you gain that amount of life points instead. And that can bamboozle your opponent to get you a lot of life points. Like they attack with a Neo Galaxy Eyes, 4,500 attack. I don't know when that's ever gonna happen, and that's cool and everything. But the only life point that matters in Yu-Gi-Oh is the last one. I don't care how many life points I have. I care how many resources are on my field. I care how many cards are in my hand, right? And so Hollowed Life Barrier would prevent me from taking that damage as well. And instead of converting it into useless life points that I don't need to further my strategy, it also protects my monsters on the field to maintain my board presence. So this is just off-brand. That to me, it's good in certain strategies. I get that certain decks love to use it, and it's a free-to-play card. So I'm not knocking it because I think it's like awful. I do think it's awful, but that's not why I'm knocking it. I genuinely think it's just a worse version of Hollowed Life Barrier, at least for the purposes that I would use it. Up next is Solemn Scolding, but I lied to you. We're doing Super Team Buddy Force. All right, so this card, in my opinion, has the potential to go in A, but I'm putting it in B, and let me tell you why. This card is great. You can you have a monster on the field, summon a monster from your hand or your graveyard with the same type. That could make for some crazy plays, because most archetypes have monsters of the same type, and I don't think it has a level restriction. You can summon monsters of any level whatsoever. I just don't think it's the most relevant right now. I feel like the right archetype for this card hasn't come out yet. Yosendras are great with it. Desperado was great with it. Maybe I'm just underwhelmed with it for reasons. Teller Knights is also great with it, and I love Teller Knights. I don't know. For me, it just doesn't feel like it's an A level of power. Like I feel like the cards in A and S, like these cards can completely unravel someone's strategy, and these cards can they're just really like they can get yours going. I don't know. It just does. It feels like this is where you belong to me. Now we go to Solemn Scolding, and I think that this is an A, and my reason for putting it in A is because it's another Omni Negate that no one uses because of its life point cost. We're in a 4,000 life point meta, and it takes 3,000 life points to activate. Actually, we're in a 4,000 life point meta and it takes 3,000 life points to activate. Now, I know that I said the only life point that matters is the last one, and I still stand by that. However, one thing that I want to factor in is this card has other drawbacks. You can't have any other set spells and traps to activate this card, so you couldn't even set 2 of this card in case one of them gets dealt with, right? Like, let's say they try and Cosmic Cyclone one of them, well, at least you have the other. Like, in a situation where that happened, obviously you would still have the other. The point that I'm making is that, like, you can't have any other back row. You're very vulnerable. So if they're able to play through the first one, that was all the back row that you had, and that's not ideal. That's significantly less than what ideal is, right? The life point requirement isn't actually that big of an issue for me. I think my biggest problem with this card is that it has to be the only set card that you control. If not for that, I think I'd put it in 8. I might actually use it in more decks because that would be good for triggering a lot of skills, just playing on the edge, but it limits you. That's already a limiting factor, but then it chooses to limit you even more in what I think is a more significant way. So let's put it in B. Wall of Disruption, going off script again. I'm not reading from a script. Wall of Disruption, I'm putting in C. It used to be the big dog on campus way back when, but it's I would say it's the last remnant of an old era because people still use it every now and then, you know, as a battle trap. But Wall of D pales in comparison to Drowning Mirror Force, and even Drowning Mirror Force isn't played that much. So I don't think Wall of D, it deserves props for where it's been and where it's come from, but not for where it is now. Treacherous Trap Hole, I've begun to appreciate recently more. I've recently begun to appreciate Treacherous Trap Hole a bit more, I'll be honest with you. I never used to like Treacherous Trap Hole because I didn't like the idea of a card that would not work if I had other traps in my graveyard. So I would always feel self-conscious when deck building because I'm like, okay, I don't want to put more traps in my deck if I'm using this card. So what I would always end up doing is I would put this card in my deck to start with, and then I would think of other traps that would work in the deck, and then I would look at the deck and be like, oh, but nah, what if I end up in a situation where I can no longer use TTH? And so by virtue of that, I only put TTH in decks where there are no other trap cards that would be used, or decks that banish cards from the graveyard so that there's no traps in my graveyard, so I can always use this card. Like, I don't like having cards where I can top deck into it and it's completely useless, right? Like, I like to be able to trust every card in my deck to do what it's supposed to do, and for that reason TTH scares me, but I'm learning to trust it as of recent. I've been playing Gaia, and as a result I'm learning to trust this card a bit more. Also, we just lost Hatronade, so this is kind of taking up a lot of my limit 2 slots, so we'll see. Last up, old kid on the block, free to play Jesus, Ultimate Providence. This is, do you know what this is? Ultimate Providence is an Omni Negate. Yes, it's got a discard cost, but it's an Omni Negate that doesn't require you to only control 1. You can have 3 set, and it can negate anything. Now, what makes this kind of technical is you have to have the same kind of card that you're trying to negate in your hand, which makes it, some people may say that makes it worse. For me, that makes it better because that makes it more fun, where I have to think, okay, what kind of effects might my opponent be using? Oh, is that a Karma Cut face down? Maybe I should set 1 Ultimate Providence and keep 1 in my hand to try and play around that. Oh, but what if it turns out to be a Book of Moon? Like, I just like what it can be, what it can do, and how it makes you think in the game. So yeah, that's it. That's my trap tier list. It's a bit top heavy, more top heavy than the spells, I think. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I have a lot of opinions about a lot of things, so subscribe if you'd like to hear more of them, and have a wonderful day. I hope you've been entertained, and goodbye.